Are you ready to take your business to the next level? Every day there are countless books and articles that are published offering the key on how to make your business a success. It's easy to feel overwhelmed trying to keep up and run your business. That's why Deb Creer created the Business Power Hour. Keep up on the latest trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. Let the Business Power Hour do the heavy work for you.
Good morning. Good morning. I am Deb Creer, and I am passionate about giving professionals the tools that they need to make themselves and their businesses as successful as possible. And I have to tell you, I've been geeking out on this topic, which is kind of a bizarre thing to get excited about. But I love this topic. And more importantly, this is a topic that we're going to be talking about today that applies to every single business owner out there. I don't care if you are the one-person shop in your spare room in the basement or a multi-gazillion-dollar company. This topic applies to you. So I really hope that people are listening in and watching us and will get a lot of great tips and information from my guest. And so please join me in welcoming Evan Nierman to our program today. Welcome, Evan.
Good morning. I'm so excited to be with you, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Great. Well, let me tell people a little bit about you, and then we will dive into this. So as founder and CEO at Red Banyan, Evan brings high-level expertise in public relations, crisis management, marketing, online media, international relations, and public affairs. Throughout his career, he has provided strategic communications counsel to top business leaders, government officials, presidential candidates, and even private individuals. So again, Evan, welcome.
Thank you for having me. Let's get after it.
I know. So what we're really going to be talking about throughout the program is crisis communications. But I want to know a little bit about how you got to where you are today and how you discovered that this really is your passion in life.
Yeah, that's a great question. And, my story really starts in Washington, D.C.
Mm-hmm.
I moved to Washington at the age of, 18 to attend school at George Washington University.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that I wanted to be in Washington because one of my earliest, most important mentors was my grandfather, Nierman.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a very patriotic guy.
Mm-hmm.
He'd served in World War II. And he really believed that his life showcased the American dream. And so he felt really indebted to the country and was proud of the United States. And so he took each of his grandsons, he had 6 grandsons, he took each of us on a trip with he and my grandmother to Washington, D.C. At a young age to introduce us to Washington. He was a student at Georgetown. And so I really fell in love with D.C. on that trip with my grandparents. And so when it came time to apply for schools, I knew I wanted to be in Washington. So I applied to 1 school in Boston, 3 in Washington. Went to DC, studied communications, and my first job was actually in the advocacy space. I was working for an organization that was related to Middle East policy, American Middle East policy, and just had a great experience there. And as you mentioned in your intro to this segment, the best organizations, good people, salt of the earth individuals, at some point will inevitably come on a hard time or a tough situation. And so while I was there was actually a crisis situation. And because I was the most senior in-house communications person, I got to work with the outside crisis consultants who came in and assisted the organization. And so right away, I decided, this is where I'm supposed to do. And so I'd already been at the organization about 7 years, and I was kind of reaching the end of that tenure. And I knew crisis communications is what I want to do next. So I left and went to work at a crisis communications firm. They were LA based. I opened their DC office, and we had some really amazing clients. We had some foreign governments. We had high profile CEOs. We had some celebrities. And I spent 1.5 years doing that in Washington and loved the clients, loved the work, didn't love the culture of the organization.
That happens.
It does happen. And I'm one of these big believers that you learn more from the things that go wrong than the things that go right. And so for me, I sort of tucked away in my head at the time. I said, you know what? I love this work. I really love being able to help people, help organizations. It's a diverse set of issues you get to deal with. The stakes are high. You've really got to be on point every day. You got to show up ready to deliver. Imagine if we did this differently. And if I had my own firm and I got to pick and choose our clients and we got to treat our clients in a really respectful, dedicated way versus treating them like a piggy bank. And I sort of tucked that away and said, well, one day I hope to have my own firm. And then, life happens and things don't go quite as planned. And I had an opportunity to actually move away from Washington and move to Florida to work at a startup. So I went in-house. I did that for a year and a half. I saw the organization really take off. And then I also watched it come apart at the seams.
Oh, no.
Again, it's you learn more from the tough things that happen to you than the good ones. And I was at a crossroads in my life, and my wife was at home with our kids at that point. She had a really great career in communications consulting and whatnot. And she'd been home with the kids. We had a 2-year-old and an infant. And I knew I needed to leave the startup. And I had really 2 choices: go back to Washington, or go out on my own and give it a shot. So my wife, Robin, was very understanding, and she put her faith in me. And I just said, look, give me 1 year. After 2 organizations in a row where I was really relying on someone else to set the course of my career, I really just need to be self-sufficient. And I need to, if it succeeds, well, that's because of me. And if it fails, well, that's also because of me. I have no one to blame but myself. And so I started Red Banyan a little over 10 years ago with the idea that I wanted to do communications consulting. I wanted to focus on crisis communications, but I wanted to do it the right way. That was 10 years ago. When I started it, we had 0 clients. I had no team members. It was just me sitting at a card table in our guest bedroom. And, 10 years later, we've got offices in LA, New York, Washington, South Florida, a couple of other locations, a person in Atlanta, which I know is your backyard. And our team is approaching 25. Wow. So it's been an interesting, fascinating journey. That's how I wound up here doing this.
I love it. Well, one of the first things I want to talk about is, what is the definition of a crisis? Because I think so many people think it's the sky is falling type of thing, something like, let's be honest, a pandemic was clearly a crisis for many companies, fire, all sorts of major things. But what is the definition of a crisis?
Yeah, for a company, it's a great question. And you're right. A lot of people just assume incorrectly that when you use that word crisis, you're referring to something that is catastrophic. Or existential, where if it could end the business or end a life. And yes, those are crises, but I would argue that a crisis is any challenge that has the organization focused on a topic or an issue that they don't really want to be focused upon. Something that's negative. It could be something as small as a negative review on glassdoor.com. It could be a disgruntled employee spreading false rumors about you. It doesn't have to be a bet the farm, high stakes, sky is falling kind of situation. It's any challenge that forces an organization to be paying attention to something and talking about something that they would prefer they weren't discussing.
And I think the key for many people to think about, especially, the small business owners who are thinking, this is not a big deal, is really one bad review on, one of the sites can blossom, can turn into, something horrific, and it ultimately cost you your business. And so, one employee that goes out and says, something negative. I mean, all these various things. And clearly it can happen anywhere. It can be a nonprofit. It can be a for-profit business, volunteer organizations, all those various things. And, my background, and I shared this with you when we were chatting before, is crisis communications and crisis management. So that's part of why I geek out over this. But the biggest thing that I learned very, very early on was that little Boy Scout motto, be prepared. So talk to us a little bit about how companies can even be thinking about what do we do, not if, but when.
Right. Well, I also subscribe to that same motto, and I invoke it many times talking with our clients. And you're absolutely right. Being prepared is really critical. And so someone who's listening may be thinking, well, what are you talking about? It's a crisis. It comes out of nowhere.
Right.
How do
you can't plan for that.
You can't plan for everything. You can't plan for the unexpected. But I would say, actually, you can. And it is actually very rare that a crisis happens that is like a bolt of lightning out of a clear sky, because 9 times out of 10, you can actually predict with a high degree of certainty what types of situation your organization is likely to face. That may be because of the industry you're in.
Right.
So let's just use I don't know, put me on the spot, come up with an industry, throw something at me. Manufacturing. Okay, that's a great one. And contrary to a lot of public discussion right now, American manufacturing, by the way, this is not a political statement, but American manufacturing is not dead. There are plenty of manufacturers working in the United States. So manufacturing companies, I think that's a great example. So what could possibly go wrong if you're a manufacturer? Well, I can tell you based on our experience working with manufacturers and also a student of crisis communications, what could go wrong? One, you could have any one of a number of situations that any company could face. And that could be in the general category, non-specific to their industry. Employee issues, reviews, bad customer service, a data breach, the website gets hacked, all those types of things. Workplace violence, those are industry agnostic, and they are something that every organization needs to be prepared for. But industry specific manufacturing, so obviously you could have the risk of a death on the job, a severe injury. You could have a situation where there's a safety concern, where an employee blows the whistle on unsafe conditions within the manufacturing facility. You could have vandalism that takes place, where you could have an individual who on purpose sabotages some of the products that are coming off that manufacturing line. Those are the types of situations that you're likely to face if you're a manufacturer. And so knowing that gives you the ammunition you need to prepare, as you said, to be prepared. And so it's actually not so complicated to anticipate and to have a good, clear idea of what are the types of scenarios. Now, the specifics, they're going to vary situation to situation. We assisted a manufacturing client once where an individual was, I don't want to get too graphic on this show, but let's just say the individual disrobed and performed certain activities that contaminated the products on the line. So you can use your imagination. There are a couple of different ways that could go. But either way, there was a damage that was done to the product, and it was caught on video, and that video got leaked publicly. So you know that there are situations like that. And the other thing where I thought you were going with this, in addition to being prepared, this is really critical for people to understand when it comes to a crisis, is you cannot afford to ignore it. You cannot simply hope and wish that you weren't going through it. You can feel bad for yourself, but self-pity will do nothing to address the situation.
You get about 30 seconds of that.
Maybe. It used to be 30. Maybe it's like 25 now. Maybe 15. So being prepared is the best way to get ahead of a crisis. And then if you haven't taken the steps to prepare and you're on the receiving end, well, then it's really relying on smart strategic action in order to address the crisis, whether that means bringing in an outside expert, someone like you or me to assist, or utilizing the in-house capabilities. Either way, failure to act is not a choice.
Right. Yeah, because it is so easy for it to grow a life of its own. And I think that's what we have seen with so many things that happen is, there's that whole big thing with, when there's a vacuum, people fill it. And so if the company or the individual doesn't respond, other people do. And unfortunately, they might be correct or they might be wrong. And so it's funny. One of the things that now I don't hear it so much now, but when I first started doing social media, and we work with companies on social media as a business tool, because it is. It's a marketing tool, right, just like everything else. I would have companies say to me, "Oh, I don't want a Facebook page because someone might say bad things." And I would look at them and I would smile sweetly and I would say, they may already be. So don't you want to be there to handle it? And sometimes they took me up on it and sometimes they didn't. But yeah, you want to already be there. And as we said, be prepared.
Yeah, well, in this case, ignorance may be bliss, but ignorance could also be deadly. And
right,
to your point, if you're not at least aware, now a business owner can make a decision, and it is a decision. Deciding
right,
to do nothing is still a decision. But if you're not even aware of what's going on and you're not familiar with the conversation, then you're at risk. And, what you don't know can hurt you. And it will. And inevitably, I'm sure when people tell you now, "Oh, I don't want to have a Facebook page," or "I don't want to be public because someone may say something bad," I presume that you tell them, "Well, no, someone will say something
right,
bad. It's inevitable."
Right. So let's get ahead of it.
Absolutely.
Right. There's obviously just basics to being prepared. You need to actually decide what you're going to do. So one of the things is, maybe you need, and obviously this depends on what you do and kind of how big you are, somebody, a very, very small business, this might not apply to, but you might need a media spokesperson who is going to be the face of what you're doing. And, and have them properly trained. I mean, that's the other key in this. 5 media outlets shove a microphone in your face. Are you going to stand there and go, or are you going to be able to respond appropriately?
Well, you are, unless you've prepared,
right.
And unless you've been trained by someone who knows how to do it, has done it before, and has helped train others.
Right.
And we see it happen all the time where an individual or a company has a problem and they don't anticipate that microphone is going to get shoved on their face, or where we've told them, "Look, you could have a situation where somebody with a camera is going to knock on your door," and the reaction most of the time is, "Come on, that would never. Let's not be dramatic. Won't happen." And guess what? It happens.
Right. I worked for a big company one time, and I was the head of their crisis communications. And our CEO was one of the most articulate, educated men. I mean, but he also knew he did not respond well with rapid fire questions, and which, easily happens in a crisis. And so we worked on media training with him, but he himself, and I love that he recognized this himself. He said, "I'm not the right person to be the ultimate face." Actually, I say that wrong. He was the ultimate face of the company, but he knew what his role was to say hi, give a brief introduction, brief statement, and then turn it over to our CFO, who actually was incredibly good at responding quickly and being able to answer those questions and things like that. And so sometimes it's not the head of an organization, it's someone else. And in many cases, it is knowing when, as you said, to hire someone like you to get out in front of it, to be that media spokesperson, to be able to say, "Okay, here's what we're going to be doing."
Absolutely. And one of the key activities that takes place when you engage a crisis management firm to come in and prepare you in advance. And by the way, the best time to be doing your crisis management work is before you actually have a crisis.
Yeah, it's not
like buying a raincoat before it rains. Once it's raining, it's too late. You're getting wet trying to buy your raincoat. And one of the key activities that actually happens as a part of that process is helping the organization determine who should be in a limited group that is your crisis response team, and who should play that role of spokesperson.
Right.
And I think your observation is dead on. That individual, he may have been the head of the organization. Ultimately, the authority lay within his portfolio. He was the buck stopped there. And yet that does not always mean that the CEO or whoever has the biggest title necessarily should be the person out front.
Right.
And if you have other people, especially, in the example you gave, if you have a CFO, someone else in the C-suite, and it doesn't even need to be in the C-suite, someone with real a leadership position of any type, and or an expertise in the issue that's really at the crux of what's going on.
Right.
That individual having the skills and the experience to engage with the press and to field questions and to think on his or her feet and to be able to stay composed as rapid fire questions are coming in, that is much more important than having the most senior individual as the one who has been appointed or anointed as your spokesperson.
Right. And as I mentioned, I started doing crisis communications 30 years ago. And one of the first things that I learned was to always remember that the media is just doing their job. And now, fortunately, when I started in this business, it was long before we had social media, and so the media that I was dealing with were the television reporters, the main beat writers, people like that. They're doing a job and they want to do a good job. And, and they want to provide the right information. Now, we're not talking about the sensational journalist type of people, but the people who really are interested in doing a good job. And you've written a great book. It's called Crisis Averted, PR Strategies to Protect Your Reputation and the Bottom Line. And one of the things that you talked about in it that I liked was to say, you need to treat them with respect and realize that, yes, they are doing their job. And so when you say, hey, here's the information that we have to give to you, especially if it's, off camera is a little bit easier to do things like this, to be able to say, okay, here's the information from our side. They do want both sides. They don't want to get it wrong. That's the key. They don't want to have to backtrack on their stories. So to be able to say, okay, here's the situation. We want to make sure that you have all of the facts from, usually it's two sides, but we want to make sure that you have the facts from our side. A good reporter appreciates that. They, like I said, they don't want to have to backtrack and go, ooh, we got this one wrong.
You're right, 100%. And I do think, it's unfortunate that in this current hyper-partisan political climate, in an age where we're coming off of a pandemic, lots of different challenges in our society, there's a lot that's pulling people apart. And I think one of the unfortunate byproducts of that frustration and rage has been a demonization of the media.
Right.
And part of it, frankly, is the media's fault. And I'm talking about the media that made a strategic decision to move away from neutrality, to not simply be seeking out the facts and putting them out, but actually advancing a political perspective or a narrative, or not necessarily hard news, but they're much more focused on analysis. But even in today's climate, we've moved away from a lot of the media outlets providing analysis to instead providing, I don't know if I'd go so far as to say incitement, but where they are pandering to their audience, they are trying to advance a certain narrative.
Right.
And I think that it's unfortunate because not all reporters are doing that.
Right.
And there's only select outlets that are doing it. And I think by and large, I agree with your assessment. Most reporters who are out there are just like every one of us. They're showing up every day and trying to do the best job that they can. And it's incumbent upon a reporter who's actually living journalistic integrity and applying those ethics. You have a moral and ethical responsibility, not just to get the story right, but also to get both sides of a story. And so people have an opportunity when you're working with a reporter. You do have a chance. It's much tougher if you're talking about someone who's not, you described 30 years ago working with network television, on-air reporters. There's an editorial process there. It's much harder in today's world because you have individuals who have no journalistic training. They just have a website, and they may even have millions of people who are getting information from them who have no journalistic training, and they feel no obligation to get both sides. But when you're dealing with a conventional news outlet, whether it's a newspaper or a TV station or an online outlet, there's an opportunity to go to them and to provide information. And, a lot of times people are unhappy if they choose not to engage with a reporter. Then the story comes out and they go, look, this is so unfair. The reporter got it wrong. Or the reporter didn't, this is so biased. Well, what's the way to avoid that happening? It's to engage. It's
don't be that line in there, contacted and refused comment.
Yes. Or either, what's even worse than that is, the person said no comment, or you get an individual who actually, the camera gets shoved in the guy's face and he says, no comment, no comment. That is pretty much the worst thing you can choose to do.
Yeah, because what we as the consumers, as the viewers have learned is that means, ooh, guilty, they did it, guilty.
That's right. The assumption is guilt.
Right. And the hard part is for the major outlets. And again, it can be your small town newspaper to the CNNs, the Foxes, all of those. They are competing with those bloggers, with the people, and so sometimes they don't have time to fact check. So again, if you have at least some basic information ready that you can give to them, then that shows. And even just reaching out to them to say, hey, what can we do? That shows, a great deal, again, of using that word respect on your part. You recognize, hey, they've got a job to do. What can we do to help with that?
We do. And I think what some people don't understand, because they haven't been in a position where they're working with the reporters, even if a reporter is reporting out a story, which is likely to be uncomfortable for you or your business, it doesn't necessarily make that individual the enemy. And it doesn't mean that you need to have a hostile exchange with this individual. There are ways, even if they're, take, for example, what's gone on in recent weeks out on the West Coast. There was an oil leak, and, the company knows that it's under fire for this. They know that they're facing bad press. It's not like the company wanted to have the oil leaking into the water, nor did they want the media focused on that. But if they have information about what they're doing to address the situation, people tend to get upset with the reporters, to your point, who are really just doing their job. They're trying to find the information. They're trying to tell the story. And it doesn't necessarily mean, even if you're, under duress and you're experiencing a tough time in your business and a reporter's asking uncomfortable questions, there's no need to escalate from 0 to 100 and to take it into negativity. My personal look, I've worked at places where that was the default was combativeness. And, I spoke about the firm where I really cut my teeth on crisis PR. And unfortunately, a lot of what I saw there was what I viewed as a needless rush to combat with the reporter.
The sky is falling. The sky is falling.
And really not even just that, but I mean personal hostility toward the reporter, insulting the individual or leapfrogging him or her and saying, look, you're clearly, I want to talk to your editor.
I'm going to go to your boss.
So it's not my style, and it's not what I teach and coach among my team members. Maybe it's just my upbringing. I was born and raised in the deep South in Louisiana. And there, even if you disagree with someone, look, the South has plenty of problems, plenty of things to critique, But what I will say is a credit to the Southerners is even if you disagree, you can do it politely and with a smile, and you don't have to resort to personal insults. And I think
you may look at him and say, well, bless your heart.
That's right. Instead of telling the person, look, you're a complete idiot and you got it completely wrong, say, oh, you know, I think there's another side. I think you're missing the point here, or here's something that it's clear to me you don't understand. And so I want to help you understand it. There are ways to deal with people, and think about it also just in terms of interpersonal communication. Who among us wants to be in an argument or to feel like there's conflict when you can simply have a discussion? You and I I presume there are certain issues where you and I,
we probably don't see eye to eye.
Yeah. And guess what? That's okay. And I'm happy to have the conversation with you. And it doesn't mean that you're a bad person. Doesn't mean that we're at war with one another. It just means we can discuss it. And unfortunately, you know, American society right now is so, there's such stratification, and it does make me, it concerns me greatly. I think it's a bigger issue than just the communications, PR, crisis communications. It's something that's really impacting every asset and every facet of our society. And I think we need to take a deep breath, and we really need to think hard about public discourse in this country and how we speak to one another. What are the types of things that we put on bumper stickers and that we show those around us? What messages are we sending to children? Are we showing them the best of who we are as a country? Or are we allowing Americans to look at other Americans as the other and the enemy? And right now, that's really what we're doing. And it's very dangerous.
Things and you know, this, you're in DC, so obviously you see this a lot. I mean, the politicization that's it, I missed a ziz in there, of things is just incredible, you know, and heartbreaking. You know, I spent, now this has been a while ago, but I was a lobbyist for a couple of years in Colorado with the state, and you know, we knew that we absolutely had to get along with the other side, whatever the issue was, if we wanted things to proceed. You know, and did we argue? Did we fight? Yes. You know, we definitely, you know, fought on behalf of our clients, but we still knew that we still had to work together. So we might win on this one issue, but we might need to give a little on the next one. But yeah, you know, the whole, and you know, we won't, this isn't a political debate, but you know, like the whole vaccine issue, the whole mask issue, all of those things that have become just so politicized. It really does. It just baffles me. I'm like, you know, when I had grumpy old man. Now I have health issues, so I wear my mask all the time. I've had my booster shot, all those various things, but I still wear my mask pretty much all the time. And I had grumpy old man, the curmudgeon, right, who jumped me about wearing a mask, and I finally said, I'm sorry, what does it matter to you if I wear my mask? I mean, how am I harming you? And he and left. But you know, it's so bizarre. And I do think that Facebook, social media, all of these things has made it worse, because we think that screen, that monitor, is a shield, and it gives us the ability and maybe even the right to say what we want, to call people names, to say these things, because they're never gonna see us. And we see that happening with things like reviews, you know, where somebody will go to, you know, to somebody's business page or to Google, Yelp, all those various things, and they will say the most horrible things because they know that there's really nothing that's going to happen. I mean, yes, there are some legal ramifications if you say things that are, you know, just obviously something that legal action can be taken on. But, you know, people do tend to, and I see it, right. You see it all the time too. You know, we see these things. It's just like, didn't your mother teach you any manners?
That's right. Or if you know, whatever happened to that maxim, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say it at all. Well, that saying, it goes back a lot longer than Twitter, where coming up with the best zinger or or, mocking someone else, it's become a sport. But what people fail to keep in mind is, there are consequences and real life consequences to that kind of discourse. And words do matter. And I think that's why we've seen in our society, increased acrimony, and we're allowing ourselves to devolve, and we're playing into the hands actually of countries that want to do us harm, and want to see us fail.
Yeah, I'm sure that they're kind of even in there poking a bit, right?
They are 100% with as Americans rip each other apart and we tear ourselves up from the inside. That's exactly what the Russians want to see.
Right.
I mean, this is, they're masters at this. And, to your point, I could give you a concrete example that even happened in my own small town where I live in the suburbs here, where there was a certain guy and he was agitating against a political candidate for the mayor race. I mean, what's the
pretty small potatoes in the long run, right?
Yes. And he was saying really hateful personal things and accusing one of the candidates of unethical behavior and basically calling her a criminal. And her husband was deeply upset by this. And he confronted the individual face to face in real life at a park in the town. And the guy the agitator was taken aback. And once that situation was eventually diffused, he went back to his keyboard and he talked about how he could not believe that the candidate's husband had confronted him.
Of course.
And
attacked him.
How dare he? And he actually said in his post, I would never get in someone's face or say those things to them. The way that he did. I would never confront someone in real life like that. I might raise issues online and I may say things here on Facebook. So again, there's a disconnect. Someone will sit at home on a keyboard and level the most outrageous accusations and say the most horrible things. But they do it largely because they know that the odds that there's going to be a consequence to that are small, and they wouldn't necessarily have the guts to do it, because it could spark a confrontation or even violence. But, to this point of violence, what people don't understand when they try to either attack people online or even cancel them as part of this increased cancel culture we're seeing is words matter, and they can have real safety consequences. So we've counseled some clients who a video was posted online that didn't paint them in the best light. And guess what? We all have moments in our lives where if we had to take them back, we had to do it differently, we would. And I think if you were to ask this individual, in fact, I know because I asked him, look, if you could take it back, would you have said it the way that you said it? Would you have behaved that way? And the answer was no, of course not.
No, I was caught up in the moment.
Caught up in the moment. But what happened? The person gets exposed. It goes online. It goes viral. People dox him. They post his address online. They say, we've been researching. This is who this individual is. This is his business. Let's put them out of business. And next thing you know, you've got people attacking physically his space, throwing bricks through the window, calling the home in the middle of the night, threatening to kill him and his family members. This is the dark side of cancel culture that people, I think, sometimes don't even realize the consequences and the potential negative repercussions of being so virulent in what they say online. It can threaten lives, and it does.
It does, and I think one of the things that really bothers me about cancel culture, and let's be honest, it happens both sides. Again, this is not political. We see it happen it's not just sides or, all sorts of things. When people go back 10, 15 years and look at somebody's social media posts, I'm a big college sports person, especially college football. And, we obviously saw this with professional also, when people are going back years to see what somebody said, or, a Halloween costume that they wore 15, 20 years ago, and using it now against them, that bothers me. But it's also one of those things, and you talk about this in your book, where those challenges can be opportunities. So, say somebody goes back and finds, a tweet that you did 20 years ago that you used language you shouldn't. I guess you couldn't tweet that long ago, but you know what I mean.
You posted it online somewhere.
Yeah. And so, instead of doing that, wasn't me. I love the people. Wasn't me. Ugh, I don't care. Even if you were paying someone to manage your accounts, you still should have oversight of them. But, that's when you say, you know what? I did write that. That was incredibly stupid. And here's what I have done and learned since then. And that's where you use that as that opportunity, and so even if it's a business that maybe had, a bad track record, now they say, okay, here's what we have done to fix that. All of those things, that's where it becomes that opportunity. And the big thing is acknowledging that it happened. And that's really hard, especially when you get the lawyers involved. And I was looking through your employee list. You have an attorney on staff because we need those people. They really are there for our best interests. But, when you acknowledge it and say, you know what, my bad, but here's what I've done since then. People are like, oh, okay.
That's right. That's absolutely right. And, somewhere along the line in this country, it became a negative to change your mind.
Right.
Why? Why is that?
Why can't we grow?
We can, and we should. And things that I thought when I was a college student, maybe, some of them are the same today and some of them have evolved.
Right.
And there were things that I felt a certain way about in my 20s, and maybe now in my 40s, I feel differently. And I can change my mind about certain issues. And unfortunately, people hold it up as, oh, look, he's flip-flopping, or, we can't believe what he's saying now because he said something different before. Right. And there's, whatever happened to changing your mind, you should still be allowed to do that. And companies, I'm not going to put my foot in my mouth like Mitt Romney and say, corporations are people, but businesses, companies, even small companies, they're comprised of people. Right. And just like people, there's not a single one of us walking on this planet who hasn't done or said something that was wrong at some point.
That we wouldn't want the world to know about.
Every single one of us. That's part of being human. And we need to become, I think, more understanding, and we need to recognize that every one of us is fallible, and we've all done or said something that if we had to go back and do it, we would do it differently. I know one of my regrets was in middle school. It still bothers me that I teased some people in my middle school, and I made comments to someone that I shouldn't have. And even today, 3+ decades later, it bothers me because I hurt somebody's feelings back then. And so every single one of us has things in our past and even today that maybe we're not necessarily proud of. And what people need to understand, to your point about companies that do make mistakes, is admitting that you made an error is not weakness, and it's not bad, and it doesn't need to stain your brand forever. In fact, I would argue you get more credibility and you are more authentic and more true if you recognize that you haven't lived up to your brand promise at some point, but actions speak louder than words. Since that time, what have you done to set it right? What have you done to change it? What have you done to address that culture within your organization, whatever the case may be? And look, every one of us has things we can and should do differently. And we need to treat, I think, one another with a little bit more grace and understanding, because there's not a single person among us who has always done and said the right thing.
Right. And Now, if that continues, that bad behavior, well, that's different. And we've certainly seen that with people, and all of what we're saying applies to individuals as well as companies. I mean, we all have our personal brands, we have our personal reputations, and so all of this is just as important. But, I tell people, if you would not say something to someone's face, don't write it. And I don't care, email, social media, whatever, if you don't have the gumption, we'll use a politically correct term to say it to their face, then you shouldn't type it. And it is just kind of, take that moment and pause. Now, you might actually type it out. I mean, how many times have we done this? We've got And I tell people, don't, especially if you're doing an email, don't put anybody in the send, because then, you don't accidentally send it, but get it out of your system and then go, okay, now we're going to respond more appropriately. And sometimes getting that anger and venting, I mean, it does kind of sometimes help clarify what you're thinking about. But then when you take that pause, you can go, oh, okay, we're not going to call their mother names,
right.
And things like that. But the thing, and I think this is important too, sometimes we still need that passion, because it shows that we care. It just has to be directed in more a positive way.
Yes, I think that's right. And, we see every day people burn down their personal brand or burn down their business by what they say on social media. Right. And, I had the opportunity a number of years back to give a TED talk, and it was called How We Risk Our Lives Online.
Oh, you talked about this in your book. I love this.
I did. I mentioned it there too. And this is something that I talk about, I give talks at schools and to parents, and because as a parent to two relatively young kids myself, I'm very concerned about, not just what they're accessing on the internet, but I'm deeply concerned because of the kind of work that I do as the CEO of a crisis management firm. I see every day people who literally destroy their lives because of what they say or do online. And it's actually really simple in order to prevent destroying your company's brand by what you say online. And that's two rules. When it comes to what you're going to post online, share with care and post with purpose. And if you adhere to those two rules and you're careful about what you share, and you make sure that before I hit send on this, what's the reason behind this? What do I hope to get out of saying this thing? And if you just give yourself that moment to gut check and to think and to hit pause before you hit post, it can make the difference between, showing people a side of you that's ugly and doesn't represent you or your company, versus taking a more measured approach, waiting a beat and saying, you know what, to your point, if I weren't going to say this to someone's face, if they were sitting here with me, why would I say it online?
Right.
If would I be comfortable, knowing that I have to own these words? And it's a challenge, and it's a challenge for business owners. Anyone who has someone managing your social media, whether it's in-house or it's an agency that's doing it for you, it's really, really important to consider that person is your brand. They are speaking for you. Every single tweet, every Facebook post, every comment, every blog post, it all is articulating your brand. So you better make darn sure that what your brand is representing and who's representing you is how you want to be perceived.
Right. I keep that in mind with my own personal social media, because I'm a consultant to others. And some of them are actually my Facebook friends, things like that. But I tell people, my mother, who's 89, looks at my Facebook page pretty much every day. So I better behave myself. But more importantly, I think, if my clients or potential clients were to see a personal post from me, what would they think? It's a catch-22, because I tell people, we need to be authentic to ourselves. And, if you feel passionate about something, I'm not saying don't post it, but again, think about it first. How is it going to come across? Even just things like clicking like, I saw a story last week where a big country artist, and I don't remember the name, so I don't want to get it wrong, so I'm not going to say it. She had clicked like on a controversial video. That's all she did. No comment, no anything. And it probably wasn't even her. It was probably, who knows?
Right.
And she got lambasted in the media. Or not in the media, she got lambasted online for simply clicking like. And I tell people, that is the trolls of the world are big and hairy and scary, and they love to damage people for whatever reason.
Yeah, it's true. It's taking people out and taking them down a peg. We could spend a whole show talking about the psychology of that and why people derive pleasure from seeing the misfortune of others. But you're right. Every activity, you're being judged by that. Everything that you're putting out there, every like, every comment, etc., which just illustrates, it's hard, and it becomes exhausting also because, to your point, there's this catch-22. On the one hand, you want to be authentic, you want to be who you are, and there's nothing wrong with having an opinion and wanting to share it. And you can rest assured that if you take a position, there are going to be plenty of people who don't agree with you, and they're going to take the opposite tack. And so it becomes very hard and very exhausting to be on guard and ever vigilant. But unfortunately, that's just the world that we live in today. And until things change or fundamentally shift, we just have to, this is the world. These are the rules, and we just need to adopt different behaviors and adapt to the situation. Because I think it was, I don't remember if it was Ben Franklin who said it, but a lot of people have, I think it was him, but a lot of people have said it since in some version, which is, your reputation, it can take a lifetime to build up a reputation and only minutes to lose it.
Right.
And that's true today more than ever before.
Right. Well, oh my gosh, now that we've scared everybody half to death, and they're really going to be ostriches and they're going to hide. That's not our point. Our point is, like we were saying at the very start, you just need to be prepared. I was sharing that, I have clients that when they get a negative review online, the first thing they want to do is delete it. And I tell them, no, can't do that, because the services are providing an unbiased review, which means negative as well as positive. And I tell them, I don't care what is said. We, as the company, need to respond. And I said, and you're not really responding for the person who posted, because almost always they never respond again. They went, they typed at midnight after they'd had a couple scotches and they were done.
Right.
You're posting it for the people who read it afterwards. So when you empathize, when you say those words, I'm sorry, which I know lawyers don't like those two words, but sometimes you do need to say, I'm sorry. But what we always do too is, I tell them, here's how we resolve the situation if possible. I mean, sometimes you can't, but I almost always say, here's who to call. And I give them a name and a phone number. And I say, here's who to call because we would love to discuss this with you further. They never, ever, ever, ever do it. Knock on wood. They just don't do it. But again, it's for those other people who read it to go, okay, they responded. Same thing, with media, all of those various things. We just want to know that the company cares. And I think that really is what it comes down to, is when something bad happens, and as we've said, it's going to happen. We just want to know that there's, companies are made of people. As you said, we want to know that those people care.
That's right. I agree. There's nothing I can say better than how you just said it. I agree with everything.
I love it. See, I read your book. I mean, I have been doing this 30 years, but yeah, I mean, it's a scary world out there, folks, but it is also so good. I mean, as we mentioned, you can take some of these and turn them into opportunities to say, here's what we have done. Take a look at us now. Isn't there a song somewhere that, and those various things, but there are times where you think, I don't know what to do. Help, help. So you need to contact somebody like Evan. And, and so Evan, tell us more about how people reach you and connect with you, and then the services that you provide.
Sure. Well, look, I just happen to have on my table here a copy of my book.
There's the book, Crisis Averted.
One thing you can do is pick up a copy of this book. You can get it at Barnes & Noble, Amazon.
It's a quick read, folks, but great information.
But this is probably the key thing I would tell you to have to make sure that you don't have an issue.
Right.
So you can download the book, you can listen to it on Audible, etc. Have the book. It gives you tons of ideas of things you can do on your own so that you don't have to hire an outside consultant. You don't have to call me. You don't have to call anyone. You can do a lot of these things yourself. We talk about a lot of these issues of what's going on in the world. We assess whether companies are doing a good job or a questionable job handling crises. We talk about it on our website. You can visit us at redbanyan.com to check out our blog, to see what we're talking about. We're also very active on social media ourselves, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, all of those different channels, because in this day and age, these tools exist and you have to be there. You have to be in the conversation. And, I can't believe that we just spent almost an hour talking about this. It flew by so quickly.
Holy schmoly. I kept thinking, thump the timer. It's wrong.
It's wrong. But, this is my passion. This is what I'm interested in. I love people, and companies are made of people, and entrepreneurs and business owners are people who are willing to do what most people are not, which is to risk it all and to put themselves out there and try to create a better life for themselves and their families and their clients. And so I tip my hat to all of your readers, anyone who's out there who either is working for himself or herself, has started a business, or is leading in an entrepreneurial style within another company. And, look, I loved being here with you to talk about this stuff today. And I just hope that folks who are tuning in, got some ideas. Maybe we helped avert one crisis today, because someone, before they hit send on that controversial statement, maybe they'll think twice. Maybe we can help someone prevent stepping in it before they do. And at the end of the day, the reason I wrote the book was to help people and to help people navigate this increasingly challenging, tough world that we're living in. And hopefully, empower folks so that they can do good in the world.
I love it. I love it. And folks, it really is something that is pretty easy to prepare for. Just sit down and think, what would happen if? And some are things, that, if you get a bad customer review, if you have, an employee that you have a situation with. I mean, as Evan was saying, there are universal situations that happen. And so you can be prepared for it. We're not saying spend hours and hours doing it, but, kind of think it through. Also think, okay, who would we call? What would we do? I mean, in many cases, it might be, hey, we need to call someone like Evan. Hopefully, not to dissuade you from calling Evan, but hopefully it doesn't reach that point, and you have been able to deal with it. But it is nice to know that there are organizations like Red Banyan that can step in and say, okay, here's what we can do. And I love in your book, you talk about the fact that as a crisis firm, it's not, well, we'll call you within 24 hours. It's okay, we're here. And so I love that, because, in this day and age, we can't wait 24 hours.
24 hours is too late. There's a lifetime.
Yeah, we used to call it a news cycle, and now the news cycle is 28 minutes, seconds.
It's relentless, but it's the world we live in. And so we have to adapt.
Right. I love it. Well, Evan, do you have any final thoughts for everyone?
Any final thoughts? Maybe this comes off as a little too feel good or too I don't know, hippie like, but I'm feeling a tremendous sense of gratitude today. I really enjoyed talking with you about this, and to have the opportunity to be on your show and to speak directly with some of your listeners. And hopefully, I do believe that we're having a tough time in the country at the moment, but there's a lot of good people here and a lot of great companies. And I know that, every one of us, if we do our part and we try to make this world a little kinder, a little bit more understanding, and we just do the right thing, it's going to lift all of us up. And that's my hope today. And that's kind of that's my closing thought of today. That's the headspace I'm in.
I love it. And this really has been a delightful conversation. I have been talking with Evan Nierman of Red Banyan. I've just about combined all the words into one. Again, Evan Nierman from Red Banyan. I'm Deb Creer. And until next time, everyone have a great day.
Tune in for our next program for even more trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. The Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Creer, is proud to be part of the C-Suite Network.